So the first question, Shaylee is wondering, as you've developed this body of work, have the results of the jacquards informed how you design subsequent work?
Yeah, I think the earlier jacquards, which are the ones hanging in the back wall on the two sides of the video work, I would say those are the earlier ones, the first ones that I did. And at that point, I was just taking a design and turning it into a jacquard piece. But when I received them, um, seeing how it's woven really helped plan the next set so that I'm designing for it. So the larger ones that are suspended in midair, that's not against the wall, those two were planned to be jacquard pieces. So as a result, knowing that how in a jacquard everything gets scaled up was a way to maybe make the design significantly smaller so that when it gets scaled up, you're actually maybe some of the details will translate better. So if you look at those larger ones that are suspended mid-air, you can actually see some text in it. And it's subtle, but it's there. But that only was I was able to capture it because of that feedback of the first round that I did.
Is that because the size of the font is large?
I think the smaller the design, and then if you reproduce it large, it's kind of like if you take a large design and only scale it up by like 1.5, a lot of detail will get lost. But if you're taking something that is like those ones are, I think, 12 by 16, if I'm not wrong, you take something 12 by 16 and make it 60 by 80. It's a significant jump. So even though, because in a jacquard woven tapestry, the threads really play a trick on your eyes. So if you're up close, it's very difficult to actually see what you're looking at. You really have to stand far back. So that standing far back in that pixelatedness of the threads being woven, maybe you'll see the text. And the text is what I was trying to see if it can be even achieved when you translate over to jacquard. And got pretty close, I would say.
Yeah, they are beautiful. A lot of people, when I was giving my opening remarks, I sort of said, look closely at those prints, see the details so you can get a sense of the amount of work. Yeah, incredible.
Still exploring that possibility of what happens when it becomes a jacquard. There's things that the weaving facility, I think this is the question that comes up later, is in North Carolina. One of the things they always try and warn me about is to not use a high concentration of one color in one area, because what they're trying to do is have an equal amount of interweaving so that the stretching or the tension of the weave remains consistent across the board. But that in itself is like, okay, wait, but what if I play with that density in one area more and keep it loose in other areas? How does that change? So I'm still exploring that possibility of what can be done. This whole jacquard thing started during COVID and before COVID. And at the time I was researching to see where can I go to do it in person. And then COVID hit and there was no in person. And that's how I ended up producing everything with a supplier. I'm still hoping one day to actually work with an actual jacquard loom and be able to understand its mechanics and the math involved in it.
One of the kids who came into the exhibition asked, who made all of these?
To the kid, the answer could also be that it's another person who's just trying to be a kid, is who made all of these. But if we really get technical, there's things that I did make. There's things that I planned and designed that was then produced by another person. So, but as a general summary, it's just another person who's trying to be a child, which is, I guess, me.
Another person who came to the opening remarked, there's a different fringe palette on the opposite ends of the tapestries, particularly black and white, Yet I don't see black and white in the tapestry the way I see the colors. Why is that?
I think the black and white fringes that they're seeing is on the jacquards, not on the carpets. The carpets don't have black and white in it, but the jacquard does. Jacquard, if you look at it, one side of the fringes are black and white, and the others are in color. And that's actually your CMYK and then your tone and hue. So the black and white plus the colors coming together is making you see the colors that you see. I don't know how else to explain it. It's basically the rules of printing. It's CMYK. It needs the black and it needs the white to make something tone darker or tone lighter. And then it needs the other colors to mix together to create the illusion of the color that you see in the work. But in a carpet, it's the wool is dyed to be the color that you see. There's no color mixing happening visually, optically. It's happening in the dye. In a jacquard, it's happening optically. Equally enough to keep equal tension and yet have the colors accurate. It's crazy stuff.
So another visitor to the exhibition asked, how involved are you with the process of translating the Word document into tapestry form? And what is that process like?
I'm quite hands off in most of works that I'm not doing myself, which means anything that is not being produced digitally or being done in the moment in a Word document. Anything outside of that, I'm quite hands off. Partially because circumstances has been like that. I don't have access to the weavers. I don't have access to the loom. But at the same time, these crazy weird things happen where you suddenly learn something about a process that you're like, I never thought this would happen. Learning about jacquard and how it even uses CMYK, or completely letting go of what the outcome might be when the weavers in Afghanistan sit to create the carpet, and then to see the decisions that they made. I think that has become more exciting than being full in control. I think letting go has become more enjoyable. I've always felt like if I designed my work in advance and then sat and made the work, I would not do it. It would just be immediately, I would be bored. Somewhere in the process, I would give up or do something different. So, because I have no idea what I'm doing when I sit to do something, that's exciting. There's so many problems I can face, but then I have to troubleshoot those problems. That becomes the fun. But if I sat and did a work and it had no issues, probably be bored of it pretty quick. I think the challenge is the excitement.
Vicky Talwar asks, do you plan your color scheme for the artworks or is it more intuitive?
It's a mix of the two. When I start a work, I have a sense of what palette I'm going for. But then those issues that I face because I don't know what I'm doing can change that completely. Like the K Gobble WN1, which is in the show in 3 different formats. The original palette of that was blue, but blue and the gray that I've used, they change tone at random. And it's very unpredictable. You never know when it happens. If it happens, there's no turning back. There's no like, okay, I'm going to close the file, reopen it, and everything will reset. You're just stuck with a tone darker blue now. So that happened in that piece. And when it happened, my OCD was like, I can't. I mean, I can't continue like this. Either I have to redo all the blue, but I didn't like the tone darker. So I redid the whole work, but I did it in gray. So that's how that one ended up being gray, even though I had a plan for it to be blue. So yes, I start with a palette, but I not always end up using that exact palette.
This question actually came up quite a bit during the opening. A few people came to me with this question, or different versions of it. Please explain your titles.
Titles are acronyms of what were the decisions made to make the work I'm making. So for example, 44NS10F is 4 by 4 non-symmetrical 10 font. 1216 JTFOR 6080 is 12 by 16 for Jacquard done at 60 by 80. So the titles are basically just acronyms. When I started doing acronym based or numerical based titles, it's partly also because I don't really want to give you anything to work with when you're looking at the work. If I give you titles that explains things, then I've already blocked out your relationship with the work. So when I give you gibberish, you have no idea what you're looking at, and you'll figure out your own relationship with it.
Another audience member came up to me, and her interpretation was that the titles seemed like the kind of randomized passwords for, you know, I thought that was pretty great.
There is a relationship there. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to give away my passwords, but my passwords are like this.
David Palmer asks, well, first, he wishes to thank you so much for sharing your powerful and thought-provoking art with Stouffville. Can you please comment on how your lived experience in different places, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Canada, and others, at different points in your life, has influenced your pieces?
For sure has, subconsciously. But I think having lived in so many different places has left so many questions. But all of that, I would say, remains in the subconscious. It's not like I'm sitting and thinking about what is it that I'm trying to resolve here. The process of making work in Microsoft Word, or this process of making these digital works and textile-based works, has been quite intuitive and troubleshooting based. But the the things I end up talking about when I do present the works is things that I've learned about myself and the work 5 years after I've made something. Yes, living in different places, I would say the influence is that it's left a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of curiosities of why and where and how it all even came about. Why am I where I am now? And then how, and then to have this comparative experience when you see what's happening in other people's lives and other artists' practices. One of the things that I was going through a lot in the recent past, I would say, um, watching artist videos and artist talks and how everyone talks about how they went home and reconnected and how that informed their work. For me, each stage of my life has been a chapter that closed and wasn't reopened. We left Afghanistan, we didn't go back. We left Pakistan, we didn't go back. Canada's the only one that is an ongoing relationship. So I'm growing with it and it is growing with me. So I'm not really paying attention to it as much. But I'm sure if that chapter one day is no longer accessible, it'll be like, okay, what happened there? So the lived experience has surfaced a lot of questions, and I guess those questions have turned into the conversations I have today about the work.
When I walked in, I felt I could see myself wrapped up in one of your tapestries by the fire. Very comforting. What made you decide to change your artistic medium?
I think that wrapped up in tapestry, that's literally what those jacquard tapestries are. They're blankets. So that person can easily wrap themselves in one of those and sit by the fireplace. My mom uses one at home often. Uh, what I think the change in medium is natural. When I started making the digital works, I immediately wanted to make carpets. Somewhere along the way, I learned about the relationship of textiles to computers, and that brought about jacquards. And I was like, okay, well, I need to know what this is going to be. And I think that's how I end up stumbling across what my next medium is. Um, I've also, I think things that you joke about somehow end up becoming realities. I'm a painter, but I've always said, oh, one day I'd like to make sculptures. Now I am actually designing sculptures. Uh, my joke today is that one day I'll be a performance artist. Who knows? Who knows what time will do to me to take me there?
I don't know. This question isn't in the list of questions I have, but it was something that a couple of people came to me on the night of the opening,
Hmm.
um, wondering where the digital video work came from for you. How did you end up playing in that medium?
When I first started making work in Microsoft Word, everything was only saved in the form of a screenshot. I used to make a work 1 to 3 works a day. I would take the screenshot and I would delete the file because I didn't want to give myself the opportunity to go back and edit anything. I was thinking from a painter perspective that when a work is done, you're not. So the screenshot was supposedly my completed work. But screenshots led to screen recordings. And then I tried to do screen recordings of me making a work. And when I would change the tempo of that, that started mimicking glitch. And I think from there, it easily turned into happy accidents. Like I pressed tab by mistake while a screen recording was going on, and suddenly everything shifted weirdly. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? Continue pressing random buttons. And that it's almost like doing animation, but doing it live without having any knowledge of animation. I think using softwares in the most basic way is my go-to creativity.
So Jeff asks,
Yeah.
you have talked about this work. This might be me, by the way. You've talked about this work. I get a question too, right?
Yeah.
You've talked about this work as having a goal of providing Afghans with an experience of being able to walk into a gallery and seeing something that they recognize. Can you talk a bit more about why that's valuable to you? And do you recall the feeling or recall feeling outside looking in as a non-Western artist?
Yeah, I wouldn't say just in Canada. I think art history in itself felt foreign, if I can call it that. I mean, growing up, I've had art-related books, but they were just books that I would look at the pictures. But the pictures were always of a Western story that's being told. It was, I don't know, Caravaggio's and Da Vinci's, and that's the context that you're seeing art in. Of course, there's this excitement that, oh, I can do this. Like I want to paint something, I want to make an image. But the image making process, when you're only seeing the other as the subject matter of what image making is about, it kind of creates this delusion that that's what it's about. That's the only context that's being discussed. That makes you wonder, then what about this context? What about my context? You don't see that in a gallery setting. So when I've mentioned that I would like Afghans to walk into a gallery and see themselves or recognize themselves in a work or find a relationship of them being represented in a white cube setting, I think it's important. Maybe we won't feel as alien in a Western context if we were also present in the white cube. And I think white cube is one of those platforms of the elite in many ways. So to be represented in the platform of the elite, either you have suffered really bad and somebody's making images about your suffering, or it's you talking about you. Although when I was painting, and this is where being rejected in the art context, my early paintings were all about the suffering of us. And I'm trying to bring the suffering of us to the white cube, and the white cube didn't want to talk about my suffering. Over time, the works have become not about our suffering, but rather celebration of who we are. So maybe that's a context Afghans may want to see themselves in a white cube.
Another person who came to the opening reception for the exhibition asks, can you talk about your interest in being involved in a labor-intensive process with no or limited shortcuts? How long does a digital carpet take to create in Word?
I think the labor intensive process is a meditative process. That's what it's, or at least that's what it's become for me. It's become this meditative process of repetition, not knowing what I'm doing, but having this anticipation of when I'm done doing this repetitive task, maybe I'll get to do that other task that I'm really looking forward to doing. So it's a game of patience. And I think the labor intensiveness in some ways is also honoring where the language is coming from, because textile language is not unique to me. It's something that predates me and predates a lot of us. So in that way, I am also not pro mass production, even though Jacquard is used for mass production. But I'm only open to Jacquard because of its relationship to computers. But I think the labor intensiveness has something rewarding about it. How often do we allow ourselves to slow down or to do something and really take our time? Often, almost everything around us is normally designed to speed up things. Computers, technology, our phones, our microwave, our fridge, like everything is meant to take away the task from me. And I don't want to do the task. What happens when you flip the switch on this? I have to do the task. I have to sit and type all this. I remember I was part of a panel discussion long time ago. The question was like, are these computer generated fractals? And I was like, no, I'm sitting and typing this. And they're like, yeah, but have you considered using computer generative? There's softwares for this, right? And I was like, yeah, then what about me then? Like, what am I supposed to do if something just does it for me? So I enjoy that. And as for how long does a carpet take, very unpredictable. I could do things in a day, but I could also do things in 2 years. There's a piece that was in my last show that took me roughly a year to make. And it was just because I'd given myself such a daunting task. It was working in black background. I had to change the RGB variation of every character by a certain numerical change, and I had to remember its location. So it really depends on how crazy of a task I'm giving myself and how many issues do I face, and that will decide how long something takes. So it could be a few hours, could be a year.
How do you keep on top, I guess, of the rules for each piece then? Like, do you have like a document on the side that tells you sort of roughly what you're doing? So a piece that's that long.
A lot changes. I think the rules that start a work is almost like its foundation or its core DNA, and then time and experience of the work affects it permanently. I've always talked about how the digital works are a representation of us as humans. We all have a core DNA that we're given birth to, but time and our experience to the world we live in, the society we live in, the community, the household, the room size, your friends, your social environment, everything ends up changing the rules. So the possibility of who I become tomorrow is as unknown right now as it would have been like when I was born. And even in that moment when tomorrow comes, anything can change. So the rules change, but it all depends on how much do I need to overcome? How many hurdles do I face? But if there's no hurdles, we as humans would also continue and just remain a certain way always. But as soon as we have any kind of hurdles, whether it's achieving things or being beaten down and having to get up again, these are the things that changes the rules. So if life was a game, the rules change in that way in the digital works. I can make up rules to start, but I myself, who's making up the rules, don't really know what rules are coming up.
Kathy asks, is there any feeling or emotion involved in your experience of the process, or do you think of it as more of a modernist approach?
This is where my art history uh, teachers would be saying, shame, shame. I'm not sure what is being referred to as modernist here, but I think I'm understanding it as like, is it emotion based or is it mechanical in an approach? I would say a lot more mechanical because there's so much weirdly math involved and decision making involved and troubleshooting involved, that the math side of the brain or the analytical or the logic based side of the brain is the more dominant in the process. But as for the emotion side, the feeling side, that's the conversations that come out of it later. I remember it was an exhibition I was in, and this lady walked up to me and said, like, there's no emotion in your work. I was so caught off guard, and I was thinking, like, what do you mean? Like, how do you not feel anything when you look at these? But maybe that person was onto something. Maybe they were able to see the lack of emotion involved in the making. But I can't even say that because I'm very excited when I come across a problem. So I guess excitement is an emotion. But I think when it comes to feeling in the traditional way of thinking about it, the feeling and the emotions are the conversations that it leads to, not in the making of it.
When I was writing the essay, I was the initial draft was talking. I was trying to kind of bring your painting that aspect of practice into it, and trying to think about, like, with a paintbrush you can splatter, you can jab, you can be aggressive, you can slow down, you can be lyrical. There's all these different ways of communicating kind of emotions, physical act. And then with the computer, if you jam a key, it's still
It's
character,
still,
right?
yeah. You can't jam a dot to be bigger or smaller because of how you jam the keyboard. Yeah, you're right. And I think this is one of the reasons why I always need painting. Painting satisfies the inner me. Uh, it feels, there's a feel to it. The digital, no matter how many works I make, it doesn't have that feel that painting has. And yeah, I guess the tactile, my partner's standing there and she's like, it's more tactile. The art therapist in the room is speaking from the background. But yeah, I think that that physicality that you were just describing with what you can do with a brush, um, I don't think anything can match it. I mean, I'm making a lot of digital work and it's being shown a lot, but let me paint, I'll probably be happier.